Your level of relationships, how you're able to foster them and build them, are going to determine the opportunities that you're going to get. ROR is your return on relationship. How are you leveraging the value that you're giving to get what you want and to help people get what they want?
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Welcome back to the podcast on podcasting. It's your friend Adam, AAA Adams. And if you don't want to be pigeonholed, if you don't want to be described that way or fitting into a box, we've got somebody who resonates with you. It's Elzie Flenard on the podcast. He's the mayor of Podcast Town. So if you've ever been to Podcast Town, this is the man, the myth, and the legend. So his company is called Podcast Town, and his podcast is called Podcast Town Throwdown. And in the beginning of the podcast, he says, give me an oh yeah. And so Elzie, what's your best oh yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Well, hey, my friend, I've been on your show as well. And so if you have that episode queued up, our listener can transfer right on over to your show and check it out. That'd be awesome. But just want to share a little bit about what we're really talking about on this podcast episode, because Elzie's got this idea, an out-of-box idea. Actually, there's no box at all, but he's got this idea that most people don't really think of. And he describes it as, on your podcast, one of the big things that you need to be doing is farming, planting seeds. And we're going to get there here in just a moment. But I want Elzie to say hi and quickly introduce himself.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Elzie. As Adam said, I am the mayor of Podcast Town, and I'm super excited to be here and hopefully giving some value and learning some things in the process.
Awesome. And do you know the episode? I brought that up a moment ago. Do you know the episode number? We'll be sure to tag it into the show notes down below.
Yeah, you want to hear something funny, Adam?
I do. I like jokes.
It's not a joke, but it's kind of ironic that the day that I'm on your show is the day that our podcast episode is being released as well.
That's cool. So what's the episode number, or do you not use episode numbers for your show?
I believe it's episode number 13,
cool.
If I'm not mistaken.
Cool. Well, thank you for being on the show. I'm stoked. From anybody like you who has a full service podcast agency, business to business, helping people get their message out, get their voice out, be heard and seen. You also do, like my company, Grow Your Show. We're doing marketing, and you're the first person besides us that I've heard does the marketing. So you'll manage like different types of ad campaigns, especially on maybe Facebook or Instagram. So it's exciting to have you. I'm glad that you're here. And it would be awesome if you got a couple of clients out of being part of our show. And if that's the case, let me know, because I'm always thrilled when something like that would happen. Elzie, I think that you're just an awesome guy. And maybe it's only because you say, oh yeah, or maybe it's because you have a sweet beard, but there's something there. I'm just going to mention that to you right now. But we talked about a little bit ago, we were talking about what we thought we needed to pour into the listener. And you have this unique way of thinking about podcasting kind of as farming. And so, yeah, I guess since I don't know everything that you know, this is going to be one of those episodes where I say, dude, just teach us. So here you go. Take the floor.
Well, I think for me, over the years, so my background is I grew up, so to speak, in audio, singer-songwriter since I can remember. And so since I was a little boy, I've always been involved in meeting new people, telling stories through music, through speaking, and now through podcasting. And one of the underlying things that is kind of cohesive and intertwined into all of those things is relationship building. When you are effectively building, giving value, and helping people get what they want, you get what you want. And so my whole approach in life and in business is building relationships, planting seeds, adding value. It's known as the farmer mentality, where I'm planting seeds, I'm cultivating relationships, I'm putting water on the seed when it needs it, giving it plenty of sunshine so that it grows, adding fertilizer to keep it clean. I'm not sure if your show is explicit or not, but sometimes you need that in order for it to grow. And so my whole mentality and thought process is I'm a farmer. I like to attract ideal clients. Do I do outbound? Yeah, sure. But primarily, a lot of the new clients, a lot of the business, a lot of the press, a lot of the things that come to us because we've planted the seeds, we've cultivated it, and now it's grown into something else, whatever that might be, whether it's a new relationship, whether that's a speaking opportunity or a new client. So I'm really, really big on what I call ROR, return on relationship, and farming and really just cultivating relationships.
All right. In a moment, I want to ask about ROR a little bit more in depth. I'm visualizing and going back into memories, things that I've seen and experienced in my own life that kind of relates to what you're saying. For example, one of the things that you mentioned is that you want to plant a seed and then you want to harvest that seed, fertilize that seed, and let it grow. And the purpose of that is so that you can attract the right type of animal. And for example, I'm up in Conifer, Colorado. It is what it sounds like. It's in the mountains. The main trees that we have are pine trees. And we have a ton of deer that live up here. We've got these wild raspberries. So we didn't actually plant them, in full disclosure. They just were growing. The point that I'd like to make, though, is the deer love our yard. They come to our yard more than they come to many other people's yards because we've got these raspberries that were planted and cultivated and nurtured and fertilized, I'm sure. And now we wake up, we go to bed, we are up at the middle of the day, and we see a mom and her 3 little baby Bambis. And it's because they're attracted to the fruit of what was planted long ago. And so that's part of like what I'm thinking when you're talking. And then the other part is when I was growing up as well, we owned a tree farm. So we had rows of corn on the cob. We planted deciduous trees, pine trees, coniferous trees, etc. But we also would grow flowers. And so we had like grass seed, we had like flower seeds, and we would go into the greenhouse and we would spend time and effort making sure that it was the right humidity, the right amount of light, the right amount of fertilizer or poop that was inside. And it smelled, but it made something beautiful. And I just thought that it was interesting as you were speaking. I'm like looking at these 2 experiences. So first, I want you to spend another couple of minutes, if you wouldn't mind, just on that subject, bouncing an idea off of kind of what I just mentioned. And then I want to get to that. What was it? R2R?
ROR.
ROR. Okay.
Yep.
So let's start with shit and planting and fertilizer, and you take it from there, and then we'll go to ROR.
Again, whether you are a business professional or a podcaster, same concept is going to apply. How do you give value? Value would be the equivalent to was it raspberries?
Yeah,
wild
raspberries.
Right? So
And they're thorny. So they'll poke you if you walk by them.
But when you provide that value, the deer will come to your yard. You don't necessarily have to put a neon sign up saying, "Hey, deer, come to my yard." They smell the value. They are attracted to the value and they come to the value. Your responsibility then is to continue to provide that value, to nurture and to cultivate and to make sure that those raspberries continue to grow. If you want the customer, listener, or deer to continue to come to your yard. So as a podcaster, it's the same thing. What value, what raspberry do you have for the listener? Making sure that episode after episode, you're giving that value. Same thing as a business owner. What is your raspberry? Whatever that raspberry is, do more of it, cultivate it, grow it. And that's how you expand and that's how you grow.
Yes, perfect. Love it. And let's talk about shit for a second before we go to ROR.
Yes. It smells. A lot of people don't like to handle it. I describe that as the negativity or the byproducts, the things that nobody wants to do, the mundane things, the boring stuff. All the stuff that on the surface doesn't seem like it really matters or that it helps. But when you mix it in, again, the negative feedback, the feedback that's maybe true, but not stated in a positive way, the boring stuff, all the stuff behind the scenes that's not so glorious, you need that in order to grow a great raspberry. Because if you don't have that stuff, your raspberry won't grow to its fullest potential. So you have to have the fertilizer in order to have an effective raspberry.
Okay. And maybe for any listener who's offended, I will say manure next time. I'll say manure. Or
See, fertilizer. So you can say whatever you want.
I think it goes like there's 3 levels. There's shit, manure, and then fertilizer. Fertilizer's like the euphemism. Manure, I think, is also some type of euphemism as well. Did you know that word came from, you probably know this, Elzie, but let's just share it with the few people who might be listening who have never known this. SHIT came from ship high in transit. Ship high in transit. And all it meant was they had manure. That was the original name for it, right? They had manure or fertilizer. And because back then there was like less airplanes or no airplanes at all and all this kind of stuff, the only way that they could get this manure traveled around the world and going to the farmers who needed it was that they would ship it on boats, giant boats. But what was interesting is like, you know why people wear patches? People who were pirates and things like that, they wore a patch because if they kept one eye completely covered, then when they go down in, it would be easier for them to see because their eye wouldn't have been adjusted to the light yet. So they would open it up and then they could see better in the dark. But later on, they found fire. They can control fire. They had these candles. And so they would just bring the candles down into the bottom of the ship and then they could see what was going on. However, when they had manure in the bottom of the ship, then they would blow up. They would start a fire because of all of the methane gases or whatever's coming off of that manure. So they started saying on manure, SHIT, ship high in transit. Put this above so that all of this gas doesn't get stuck in one place and we blow up because they're using candles. Anyway, thought it was interesting. That's where SHIT came from.
That is interesting. And when I woke up this morning, Adam, that was probably not on my list of things that I would learn. But that is definitely something I did not know.
So there's 3 levels: manure, the SHIT, and fertilizer. Let's move on to ROR. What does it stand for? What does it mean? How do you do it? What do you tell your clients to do? What are we going to learn from Elzie Flenard today?
Yeah, ROR simply stands for return on relationship.
Okay.
And it's a very pervasive metric because it's hard to measure. It's hard to measure when you meet someone and you invest in a relationship, you connect them with somebody else and they connect them with somebody else, how it's like this really cool multiplication that happens. But it's probably the most important aspect of any business or any brand. Your level of relationships, how you're able to foster them and build them, are going to determine the opportunities that you're going to get. So, in essence, ROR is basically your return on relationship. How are you leveraging the value that you're giving to get what you want and to help people get what they want?
Okay. So how do you do this with relationships through your podcast or in other ways in your business, Elzie?
The main skill that I would say, and ironically, I talk a lot because I have several podcasts and I'm speaking, I'm doing workshops and all the stuff, right? But the most important skill is listening. You have to listen. People will tell you what they want, what they need, if you just listen. So your job as on the front end of the ROR is to listen. Somebody tells you that, hey, Elzie, I'm looking to do more speaking engagements this year. Okay, great. I have a Rolodex of people who have virtual summits, who have podcasts, who do live events. Okay, so I'll connect them to that person. So really just listening and actively connecting people to help them get where they want to go is probably the number one skill, I think, in building anything.
Okay, what's next after you've listened?
The action. So it's just the connection. Now I have 5 people that I can connect you with that I know have podcasts, that have events, that have virtual summits. I make that connection. And not only make the connection, but follow up. Did you connect with Adam? Adam's awesome. How did it go? Was Adam a jerk or was Adam a nice guy? Was I on point with connecting you to? Okay, great. Is there anyone else I can connect you with? So now if I connect you, Adam, with 5 people who are going to get you 5 speaking engagements, what does that do in your mind or for me? The next time you're speaking or the next time you're thinking of somebody who's awesome, you might think of me. And so now when I tell you, hey, Adam, I would really love to be connected to a person who can teach me how to grow raspberries. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to think of me and you're going to connect me. And so now I didn't have to do the research. I didn't have to meet this person. Because of the front end, I listened, I acted, I followed up, I gave you value, I connected. The return on that relationship is now I save myself hours and hours of time. I got a super warm introduction to the thing that I need. So it just saves me time, it saves me effort, and it's a warm introduction.
Through my business experience, I started founding businesses in about 2005. And some work, some don't, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Through the years and going through everything that I've experienced, a lot of people have called me a connector. And I always cherished that word. Like, I appreciated it, that I would be called a connector. I thought it was a very selfless thing, right? And then my business started really taking off so much that being the connector was more of a challenge for me. So here I am, like, somebody reaches out to me and they'll say, hey, I want to get on a bunch of podcasts. And I'm like, I cannot sit down and think about who should I put him on their podcast? How will I approach the person? And what will I say in the email? And it's so much of a challenge that I regretfully don't think that I've been that thing that I was so glad that people called me for a couple of years. And if I am, it's selective. It's like, okay, I know you really, really well. Let me find some time. But then somebody that I don't know really, really well reaches out and I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who I would connect you with. And it makes me feel selfish. It makes me feel bad. And on top of it, it's probably diminishing the returns that I used to get why I got here anyway. So if I have a listener who's going through what I am going through, what would you share?
And that is a really tough but great question. I would say it's something that you simply have to make time for. It's just like when people say, well, I want to work out. I know that I need to work out, but man, I got the kids and I got work and I got this, I'm in school and I'm doing all the stuff. And I've found over the years, I've been around a little while, Adam, people tend to make time for the things that they value, period. If people value it, they make time for it. So I would say, even if it's 30 minutes a day, take 30 minutes and think of how you can connect 2 or 3 people. And that will be your commitment. If it's 15 minutes a day, that will be your commitment. And I think even at a small chunk, that adds up. You do 15 minutes Monday through Friday. Now it starts to amplify and it starts to multiply. And you do that every day for 20 days a month. Now you're really starting to make progress. So I would say, again, even if it's 15 minutes a day, think of 1, 2, 3 people that you can connect and just go to town. And also note that there are different levels of connection, right? When I'm connecting people, if it's a person that I don't know well, I'll say that. I'll say, hey, here's this person. I met them at a networking event. Don't know them too well. Met them a couple of times. Seemed genuine. Seemed like a good person that you should meet. Happy connecting. Or if I know them extremely well, I'll just say that in my email or my text. Hey, this is Adam. Fantastic guy, smart, serial entrepreneur, awesome dude. You guys should connect. So I think
you really do your listening, don't you? That's number 1, and you're not failing. All right. Cool. Okay.
So that would be my advice.
So it's part of what I'm getting and how I'm feeling after you say that is, Adam, suck it up. Everybody's busy. We all have the same amount of hours in the day. You're just making excuses because you're not sure if you want to focus on that right now. Just like those of us are making excuses for not exercising or not making the money that we want or not starting our podcast, whatever it is, like stopping drinking, eating a certain type of diet. We're like, oh, we just aren't making it a priority. And that hits home for me, and I appreciate it. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, if we can go back to the subject where we started, because I have a couple of other questions. I got this return on relationship. You listen and then you act. You actually do it. You don't make excuses, but you connect them. But when we were talking about planting seeds, I still feel like the level of detail that we got into for what it means to plant a seed on a podcast, or how to plant more seeds, or what kind of seeds need to be planted. Not really relation seeds, because that's a totally different thing. But on our shows, should we be seeding things that we want to sell or things that we want people to do after the podcast? Is there any part of those types of planting the seeds that you think you have some insight on?
Yes and no. I think it depends on the type of show. I tend to not do that. I tend to leave that to my call to action, for example. Like at the end, I'll say there are 3 ways you can support the show, and then I'll go into the 3 ways. But during the show, I'm typically not doing hard sells like, hey, buy my stuff or do my stuff. For me, it's about, in terms of seeds, is again, it goes back to the value, or the raspberries in our case. You want to give as many raspberries as possible, because when you do that, etch yourself closer and closer to the positive energy vibes. Hey, this guy just gave me a ton of value, part of people's brain. And the more you do that, when people need what you do and they understand who you are, what you do, and why you do it, they're going to call you. So it's about moving people or continue to provide that value so that you occupy that space in people's mind. So that, again, when they need what you do, you're already top of mind because you've continued to give them value. And I'll give you a quick example. So I was having an issue in my studio. We have a studio here in Tulsa with high heels walking past outside. And if you know anything about audio, that sound pierces all frequencies. It's very difficult to edit out. And so we're in Serendipity Labs, a shameless plug. And so I went to the manager and I said, man, these high heels are killing me. Can I edit it out? Can I get an area rug so that at least I can soften it so that it doesn't get into the recording? And he says, well, I don't think corporate will allow us to do that because look and feel aesthetics and all the corporate goobity glop. And he said, but I tell you what, Elzie, you can get a rug or runner and put it down while you're recording. And when you're done, you can take it up as long as you put safety cones around it and all that good stuff. Okay, great middle ground. Long story short, so I go on Amazon. I'm looking for runners, rugs, things like that. And a red one pops up. And the marketer in me says, I'm going to buy this red runner, roll out the red carpet for folks, and that'll be a thing. I put it out and I made a post, a little 3-second video showing our sign, showing the red carpet saying, hey, Podcast Town, we roll out the red carpet for you. Posted it on social. A couple of days later, somebody calls me saying they saw the post and they wanted to know more about our service. So that was a seed. I didn't intentionally do it to get clients, but it ended up turning into a sales call. So by seeds, I mean, just all of those little things, even when it's really just organic, planting those seeds, sort of like the Hansel and Gretel, where the breadcrumbs are leading to the house. You're giving those raspberries, giving that value, planting those seeds. It might be responding to a post on social. It might be commenting. It might be sharing an insight or something like that, but it's engaging, again, providing that value and planting those seeds and then cultivating that relationship once it gets to that point.
So one of the things that I heard you say on the podcast, and I love the red carpet, everything that you shared. Thank you. I'm thinking about the naysayers or the devil's advocate. And you mentioned that you should give away as many raspberries as you can. The fruit that they want, the value that they're looking for, the content that they need, you should give away as much as possible. So I think that there's a couple of people listening, and one is saying something like, well, I don't want to give too much because if I give too much, they'll never hire me. Or I don't want to give my absolute marketing secrets because those are my IP, intellectual property. That's my unique way of doing it. And somebody else is going to start a business doing the same thing, and then I'm going to have competition. I don't want to give away too much because I need them to come to my website. What I'm really looking for, they say, what I'm really looking for, the purpose of this is just to get them on my site. And the purpose of my site is to get them to call me. And the reason that I need them to call me is so that we can have a conversation and I can show them how I can help them. So if I give them all the stuff and they don't have to call me, I've lost out on money, fear of missing out. And it's real. It is an actual concern for many, many people. So I said that there's probably 2 things that they're thinking. That's like 4 different ways that they're looking at.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't give too many raspberries. I don't want them to be full. If they're full, they don't need a meal. So what do you think here?
So I think there's 3 levels, especially when you're talking about content. So there is telling them what to do. Typically, that's free. Showing them how to do it. Typically, there's some value to that. Doing it for them, that's premium. That's going to cost you. So keeping with our raspberry example, so maybe you show them how to eat raspberries, right? So I'm going to show you 3-step process to find the Addams family raspberry bush. I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, I'll walk you through how to effectively eat this raspberry without getting poked by the thorns. that might cost you a little bit because I'm giving you a higher level value. If you want me to eat the raspberries for you or process them and turn them into something else like raspberry jam or raspberry juice or wine or whatever, that's premium. That's going to cost you something. So I think when you think about it that way, it really helps to align that. So you don't want to give away the wine for free, but you can show them how to get to the raspberry patch. And to your point, get them to the website. And then you want to continually increase the value and you want to charge for that for sure.
Okay. Elzie, if there is another thing that you have experienced, like with different clients that you've worked with, you've got more than one podcast. I really want to promote Podcast Town Throwdown today because I know this listener today, they're going to get value there. Mm-hmm. And especially if they check out episode 13-ish with Adam Adams.
13-ish.
Then it'll be even better. Yeah. But Elzie, just thinking like your experience being somebody with multiple different podcasts, always adding value, focusing on ROR, planting seeds, giving raspberries, and you also have podcast clients that come to you with specific questions or concerns or unique ways of approaching life. What would you like to give us from all of that you've learned over the years that we haven't discussed yet, that you might even see as like a common thread or something like that?
Wow, another great question. So I would say that the thing that I would want to offer that's a common thread is effectively understanding your why and having metrics around your growth. Because a lot of people, they are the FOMO effect where there's a fear of missing out. And so they launch this podcast and they're not even sure why they did it. And so when they get into the 10th episode and they realize that it's a ton of work, they quit because they don't have a strong why. They don't know why they're doing it in the first place, which we could talk about how that affects the brand and their messaging and their marketing and all that stuff. Regardless of that, when you have a strong why, it keeps you going. You know who you're talking to, you know where they hang out, you know what their challenges are, those types of things. The other thing I would say is really understanding that as the industry matures, things are different now than they used to be. It's even harder to stand out. It's even more difficult to get more downloads. And so really setting up metrics to track your growth and the things that are important to your brand or your business. Download is great, but I think what you really want is conversions. You want to know how many people that listen to your show end up becoming clients or end up on your email list or your text list, et cetera. So I would say those two things, having a strong why that will inform really all of your decisions from a branding perspective, messaging, voice, colors, the whole nine, and having effective metrics to measure that growth.
All right. I want to understand if there's a tip that you have that can allow us to measure growth effectively. Like you said, downloads, those are okay. Knowing how many people are listening versus how many people are taking action versus how many are connecting with you. Is there anything that we're missing on, like, how do we track it? What should we track that would help a new podcaster?
Yeah, I would say those are the main things. You want to make sure, I always recommend a website. So how many web visits are you getting? How long are they staying? What are they clicking on? Are they clicking on for 3 seconds and then clicking off? If you have a freebie or a downloadable, are they downloading it? Your email list, is it growing? What's your open rate? Is it 20%, 30%, 80%? What's your social reach? Is it growing? Are people engaging in your content? Are people emailing? Are they calling? So there could be a number of different things, but I think the tip would be just having metrics in the first place and understanding that how those metrics drive the behavior that you want to drive, whether it's downloading a freebie or if it's using your click to call, whatever that action is, working backwards and saying, okay, in order to get to this action, here's how we're going to measure it. Here's how often, and this is what success looks like.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thank you, Elzie. Thank you for jumping on the show again. Owner of Podcast Town, and I believe that's podcasttown.com, right?
We own podcasttown.com, but we own podcasttown.net as well. So either one will get you to the same place.
Perfect. Or Podcast Town, throw down the podcast. And both links are already in the show notes. So you can just kind of scroll down and click. You'll be able to check out the podcast. And by the way, if you give them a rating and a review that's nice and you mention us, I'll be grateful. That'd be really sweet of you to say, I heard you on the podcast on podcasting. Elzie, thank you for jumping on the show. Well, I don't know if you were jumping, but sitting. Thank you for sitting through the show and my crazy questions. You said a couple of them were good, which is awesome. I'm going to remember this forever. You are a kind, kind man. Elzie, thank you for jumping on, sitting on. I'm going to let you go. But until next time, my friend, grow your podcast, grow your business, grow your income and your influence. And I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
This episode is brought to you by growyourshow.com. Grow Your Show lets you be the star of your show while we handle all the hard stuff. We offer reliable and affordable post-production services that allow you to grow your show organically without all the work. So go ahead and check out the website right now and feel free to schedule a call with me and let's take your show to the next level. Again, growyourshow.com. You just press record. We handle the rest.